see this in the ending too in Revelations, that those pagans, those Gentiles, they are going to tread down the outside courts, but they're not going to be worthy to come within the tabernacle gates. So this is how they was made. They had, again, to put this in the wilderness and take it down. It couldn't be some flimsy, junky things like we go get it Walmart. Used to be Kmart, right? Used to be this, used to be there. But it's not this flimsy junk that breaks. It's got to be sturdy to withstand. And Yahweh himself showed Moshe how to make it. Again, there's so much in Yahweh told and showed Moshe. Moshe showed them. There's so much in that, folks. But this is what it is. You have the base, and then you have the parts that went on the board, and then when you have the very top. Because remember, this had to be carried. It couldn't be so 40 foot long and everything so bad. It had to be carried by men. And yes, there was many, but it still had to be broken down and carried by these men, by the people that was there, right? So the pure white linen fence. The fence is formed of pure white barrier around the house of Elohim. Make a courtyard for the holy tent. These curtains must be made from fine linen. The white fence kept out the impure. The Israelites, if kept Elohim's tent only. They was on the outside. Why was they on the outside? Because Yahweh knew they was impure of heart. They murmured, they complained. They still had so much of Egypt in them that it was hard to talk to them, to teach them, to get them to be right. So what they had was, again, a fence that they knew better than come into. This was only for those priests. This was only for the holy. But what they should have been doing is watching and listening and learning from Moshe and learning from Aaron and learning what's going on. You know, I know it's real easy for us to say the Shekinah, the glory of Yahweh, the power of Yahweh, the fire of Yahweh, and to see and to hear his voice. These people heard his voice. I asked somebody today, do you hear from Yahweh? You know, people try to say this and try to say that, but have you heard from Yahweh? If you don't hear Yahweh's voice, then you need to find somebody who does, and not somebody who claims he hears it every day. I heard from God and he told me. No, not that nonsense. Yahweh says, and it doesn't have to, we have to understand, I think we are almost like the people in the wilderness. We don't see it because we don't have a tabernacle. We don't have the one prophet. We don't have, but we're all scattered. We're all scattered, and can we even come inside the camp? Are we even worthy? Because we all say, I can read my Bible. I know what my Bible says. I know what my church says. My pastor tells me. Are we any better than these people? Are we any more worthy? Are we any more humble? This means everything. This should be taught. I have this that I love to teach, a little model of it. And it's got the little cattle and the little priest and the little things. And, you know, I love to teach about what Yahweh has set forth because it hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed was the way that atonement was done. And he told us that he didn't glorify in goats and bulls. He said this. He said he didn't want your sacrifice. It was because of the sin is why the sacrifice, and is why Yeshua had to come. Isn't it sad that most of us are not even worthy to come even within the inner court, and most of us probably wouldn't even be worthy to come into the gate? Until we teshiva, until we accept Yahweh, until we keep the Sabbath day. He says, I will be your Elohim, and you will be my people. But that's keeping the Sabbath. And then keeping that, we learn and we glean, and we have, just like they had, 40 years. to learn. 40 years to figure it out. 40 years, maybe that's what we get. Maybe that's the time that we have to figure it out for all those who come into this late. Maybe we have those 40 years to figure it out. It seems like a long time. Seems like, oh man, I can do it all. But can we? Will we? Dare we? Yahweh help us. We have the poles and how they put the things together. Again, these had to break apart and they had to be sturdy for the winds and even people and people dropping them. You know, this is a practical solution. This ain't just everybody was perfect. I'm sure these people tripped and fell and donkeys fell over and all kinds of things happened. So it had to be so sturdy that people wouldn't just tear it up. So they went down, as you see here, and these stabilizers, if you will, went through the rings to hold it up, and then they went into these sockets. So what we have to understand is how, see how it all goes together? And now we'll get some more into a little bit of dimensions of what it was. You have the bars, as you see, and the little rings would hold the bars, which would hold them together to keep them from flopping this way and that way. The little sockets that went on the bottom to put these into were silver sockets. Then you have the Temans, and these boards were 15 foot high. 15 foot. That's more than your ceiling usually. Unless you have a big place, usually our ceilings are 8 to 10 foot. Most modern places, I think, are 8, a little bit over 8. So 15 foot high is what they were. So we go on and we see the covering of the tabernacle. Now this was probably a little bit of support. That's why the silver and why the gold and why it all had to be sturdy as well, because they're the 4 coverings that went over these, right? You have the coverings that went over to hold it up and to keep everything out, and including the people, and of course their nice prying eyes, right? The way that people love to look at things and, you know, try to be nosy and see what's really going on. We'll get a little bit closer view here. You have, it says here sea cows, but there's not sea cows, it's cows or deer. You have ram skin, goat's hair, and fine twined linen. The reason it can't be a sea cow or manatee or any of that thing is because they're unclean. Yahweh does not use anything unclean, and he knows anything unclean, just like it is written, cannot produce something clean. So cows, oxen, deer, but not something. So we have to, but I'd like to throw that in there because in some versions of Bibles and some people say this, but I want you to learn and to know and defend the word of Yahweh and to know that Yahweh does not work with the unclean. So, you know, I don't try to hide something, because I think if you hide something, then you're hurting the people. Because then when somebody comes up and says, oh no, it's a sea cow, or no, it's a, there's another one, I think gopher, or there's something in there, I forget what it is, but I think they said there's a gopher or beaver, or there's all kinds of things that people say. But if it's not clean, trust me, trust Yahweh, it was not a part of his tabernacle. Now, going forward, this is how it's set. Northeast, southwest. They had to know, again, they were not cave-dwelling people. They were not ignorant people. They knew where north, east, south, and west was, and they knew how this worked out. They knew what they was looking at. They had to, because he told them to, right? So he told them what was what. So we'll see here, we have the bronze, the laver, the table of showbread, the altar of incense, and the ark in the Holy of Holies. You have the 7-branch lampstand, the light, Yeshua. The bread is the word of Yahweh. Give me this day our daily bread. We're not talking about food. Yahweh really doesn't care that much for food as we think he does. He's not really much interested in the food other than you'll be sufficed. Because he says, man does not live alone by bread, but man lives by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of Yahweh. He's talking about, and what's represented is the bread, the word, Yeshua. The light of the world, Yeshua. The altar of incense, all the saints, all the incense, our prayers are incense. Our prayers come up before Yahweh. Our prayers are sent to Yahweh. Again, who carries... We forget about the most important things that happen. The angels carry our prayers to Yahweh. And he hears our prayers, and he either answers them or he doesn't. He either denies them. All the prayers of the saints come up before Yahweh. And all the prayers of the saints come up before Yahweh. And one of those prayers in Revelations, when are you going to vengeance for us, Yahweh? When are you, all the mortals, all the saints, all the people who have died for the name of Yahweh, for his word, for his testimony, are crying out. Their blood, their body is crying out. Remember how Cain and Abel, and the blood cried out from the earth? That blood's crying out. They're still crying out. See, we forget things that we've been taught, or we just think for some reason it just magically disappears. You know, it's like a cereal, magically delicious. No, it's not. You know, it's facts. It's what it is. Now it says there's 150 foot long, about the size of a football field, is what we're talking about, right? So let's go a little bit farther. The dimensions of the altar. The altar, it was the largest piece of furniture. It was 5 cubits long, 5 cubits broad, and 3 cubits high. 5, the number of responsibility. One who must meet every responsibility, live perfect. See, again, all this keeps talking about perfection. Perfection, perfection. You come to the water, you're immersed. You come to the laver, you're immersed. They wash themselves, they cleanse themselves. But you can't cleanse sin. You can only wash off the dirt and the grime and the things of the world. Only Yeshua can cleanse you. Only the fire, only the testing trials, only them things will prove what you are or what you ain't. This is what's represented at this altar. They would burn the bulls, the goats, the free will offerings, and it was tested and put in the fire. One who met the responsibility and lived perfect, fulfilled all the prophets, fulfilled all the prophecies, finished his work. The altar is the 4 square. It's amazing. What is another 4 square thing? There's 4 horns on this altar. If you notice, you barely see them, but there's 4 horns on this altar. 4 corners, 4 angels. 4 could be representing another thing that we went over before, right? The earth itself. He comes and he washes away the blood, the mire, the sin of the earth. Yahweh does. His 4 angels, the 4 corners of the earth. He's going to bring us all again from the 4 corners of the earth, the ones that he has scattered. He's going to bring us back. Isn't that amazing? It's just amazing in the tabernacle of how much, I believe, intricate, how much things that was in the tabernacle, that they was too busy murmuring, complaining about lynx and melons and all this junk. They was looking at the future. They was looking at Yeshua. They was looking at Yahweh. They was too busy about melons, lynx. Oh, in Egypt, guess what we had? Oh, in Egypt, you have Yahweh. But if we're not careful, what do we do today? Oh, if I lived over here, if I did this, if I did... Now, don't get me wrong. Some people are wrong in what they're living. Some people are doing wrong in how their lives are. Some people are doing terribly wrong, and they think they're right because they thought they heard, or some prophetess or somebody told them, or something said something, and they think that they're on the right path. But folks, many people, many, According to Matthew 7, the word of Yahweh, many will say to me in that day, and I will say to them, depart from me, I never knew you. The same thing we see that these people had to wander for 40 years because of disobedience. Pure disobedience. All they had to do was take the land. But they didn't, so they had to wander. It was their own fault, nobody else's. He never told them to wander for 40 years or disobey him or murmur and complain. He said, go and take the land. Take it. I would submit to you today, what are we doing? We hide here, we hide there, we go to church, we sit in our own comfy zone. Are we taking the land? Are we taking the land back? Are we taking and putting up the tabernacle? Are we the tabernacle? If you're the tabernacle, then nothing that we read in the scriptures can come there. People say, well, I'm now the tabernacle. Well, if that's true, then nothing unclean, anything that you see that he doesn't want in his tabernacle, doesn't belong in you, on you, smoking in you, another incense. Can you have a foreign incense? If you're the tabernacle, think about that. Is smoking okay? Is smoking weed okay? Is doing this? Is that a strange incense if you're the tabernacle? Absolutely it is. It was not permitted then. Oh, no, it was not permitted. We have proof. We know frankincense, myrrh. You don't see people smoking that, putting it in their pipe and smoke it. Proof of what is compared to tradition of what I want to do. So, moving on, we see, are we worthy to come within this tabernacle? Are we worthy to come and talk with Yahweh? Are we worthy of salvation? Let's go on. Inside the tabernacle, what do we have here? If we look, we see the offering, right? We see what they had. We see that they had these places to receive the offering. And we see what had to happen. So, you have the Holy of Holies, the Ark, the veil, the altar of incense, the lampstand, the menorah, the 7-branch one, the holy place, the table of showbread, and the outer veil. So these is what they had. The curtain enclosure, and there's only one way in this place. The east gate. Tabernacle coverings and curtains. The outer covering, oh, there it is, badger skins, right? It says badger skins. That's what I was looking for earlier. That it's not, again, badger, that it is cow, it is deer, covering of ram skin, and they dyed it red, and then the curtain of goat's hair, and then the curtain of fine linen, right? Not the John type. Oh, we got to have some fun, folks. Yahweh forgive us. But what we have to do is understand what's going on and what we're looking at and why it was there. So the tabernacle itself, we see what it had inside. It had all these things, the ark, the menorah, those poles that you see, the cut-off view of it, right? You see that the poles that was there, the coverings over it, the tent itself, the curtains. The entire tent was 45 feet long by 15 feet wide and 15 feet high, just like we went over before. So now we're going to put it all together. The 15-foot high was those boards, which made it 15 feet, right? The entire tent was 45 feet long. It was a wooden skeletal structure overlaid with gold, with solid roof, front wall, 5 wooden bars overlaid with gold, pass-through rings attached to each frame, like I showed you earlier. Those pass-through rings and what them bars held those golden beams covered with wood, right? The frame structure was covered by 4 layers of cloth. Exodus 26, 1 through 4. Now this is where we start getting into the tabernacle cloth is what? The skin of it. How many layers of skin do we have? You see where it's going into? This, I would submit to you, is something that we have, and it's a forever thing. It's not something, a lot of people look at it as something that happened, something that they had then, but today it's kind of what is it today? What does it matter today? What is it? The most holy place was 15 foot, containing only the Ark of the Covenant. This is Exodus 25, 10 through 22, and 37, 1 through 9. It was there that Yahweh would descend to meet with his people in a cloud, the divine appearance of Yahweh. The high priest could enter only once a year on the Day of Atonement. Hebrews 9 and 7. The table for the bread was the presence, was Exodus 25, 23 through 30. And the holy place of the tabernacle tent was 30 feet long, 15 feet wide, and 15 feet high. So there are your schematics, if you will. There is what it says of what it is. So we have to be very careful when we go and do something and say, my skin and what I put on my skin, what I tattoo my skin with, what I shampoo myself with. Because if we're going to say we are the tabernacle, and the skin represents our skin, there's another teaching I did a while back about that skin. Our skin is overlaid. The Ruach is within us. The Ruach should be visited by Yahweh. Yahweh's very Ruach should come inside of us. And when that happens, we should be changed. We should be atoned for. We should have all these things. So going on, you have again the tabernacle. You have the Ark of the Covenant, the menorah, the altar, where they washed the laver. And if you notice again what it looks like, what the things are, I know it looks kind of crude there, but these are what consisted of it. The table of the showbread. So what we have to understand is, again, putting all this stuff together and looking at what it really was. We'll go through some more here. The outer court was 150 foot by 75 foot. The tabernacle itself, 45 foot by 15 foot tall. The most holy place was 30 foot by 15 foot. And the Holy of Holies was 15 by 15. Now, again, not just everybody walked into this place. They kept the menorah burning, the 7-candle menorah. Now, if we go into Revelations, what is those 7 candles? What is the 7 ruachs, the 7 spirits, the 7 ruachs of Yahweh? What do they represent? The 7 angels of Yahweh, the 7 churches of Yahweh. Again, this is not just the tabernacle in the wilderness. This is a representation of Yeshua, atonement, and I would say the tabernacle in Revelation, the tabernacle of forever. This has a very, very, very importance to it. And most people, and the enemy wants you to do away with it, right? Most churchianity says, do away with this. What's this? That's Old Testament stuff. It has nothing to do with today. I would submit to you it has everything to do with today. Because if we don't know what we're doing, we don't know what we're looking at, we don't know what's going on, Yahweh forgive us, we're in trouble, right? So let's go forward and see what else we have. Oh, before we go too far, the veil. Coming into the veil in the presence of Yahweh, the most holy place. We have to know, again, we don't come to him any other way. We come and we repent, and we come to him and we say, Yahweh, forgive us. We say dumb things. We do dumb things. We try to make comments and do things, but Yahweh, forgive us of even those things. So this is another cutaway of what it would look like and what they had and what it was. Because, again, when we go in, we see the holy place with the table of bread, the lampstand, and the altar of incense. The length with 20 cubits, or 30 feet, with 10 cubits, which is 15 feet. It's 100 cubits, or 150 feet, long. The entrance was 20 cubits, or 30 feet. We have the altar. The first thing, once you make it in the gate, right, you have the altar, the burnt offering, and then you have the laver. Then you go into the tabernacle itself. And the first entrance in there is 20 cubits, and then inside is 10 cubits. The width across it is 50 cubits. The most holy place with the Ark of the Covenant was 10 cubits square, or 15 square. And you had the curtain that went in between there from the Holy of Holies. So this was a very intricate thing. This was something very, very well made, very well put together. It wasn't just something that, they threw together. It was something that it took a lot of time, it took a lot of effort, it took a lot to put together. And then, when they had it together, they was ready to do the sacrifices. They was ready to do the atonement. They was ready to hear what so said Yahweh. They was ready to see the presence of Yahweh. But even at this, again, the people, most, was on the outside. The different tribes of this was on the outside. If we see here, we have Dan, Asher, Naphtali, right? And we see what was outside. Again, the tabernacle. And a lot of times, if we're not careful, that's where we are. That's where we end up. That's where that we ourselves end up, as being on the outside here. Now again, the altar of incense, it was 1.5 by 1.5, the altar itself, the ark, the table of showbread, 3 by 1.5, what everything consisted of and what it actually is. So we have to know this was very, very intricate. It was very put together, and it was more a precise thing than just thrown up. It wasn't something that they just put together. Go forward. Ezekiel 44:6, and thou shalt say to the rebellious, even to the house of Israel, thus saith Yahweh Elohim, O house of Israel, let it suffice you of all your abominations. Here we go. Now we're going to start finding out other verses that is talking about more of the tabernacle, more of the gate, more of what we're doing here, right? So why is there only one way in? Why is there only one way into the tabernacle? Because Yeshua is the only way. He's the only way to the Father.